Marcus Chen hadn't cried in 17 years, not since the day he buried his wife. He'd built an empire instead, tech companies, real estate portfolios, a net worth that made headlines. But none of it filled the silence in his penthouse overlooking the city. At 62, he'd perfected the art of existing without living, his days a blur of boardrooms and bottled water, his nights spent staring at spreadsheets until exhaustion claimed him. That Tuesday started like any other. He sat alone in the corner of Giuseppe's cafe, the same table he occupied every morning at 7:15, reviewing acquisition proposals on his tablet. The cafe owner knew better than to make small talk. Marcus preferred it that way, invisible among the living, protected behind walls of routine and indifference. The coffee was always black, always bitter, always the same temperature. Predictable. Safe. Empty. The morning light filtered through the cafe windows, casting long shadows across the worn wooden tables. Around him, life happened. Couples sharing pastries, students cramming for exams, elderly friends solving crossword puzzles together. Marcus saw none of it. His world had shrunk to columns of numbers, projected earnings, market analyses. Things that couldn't hurt him. Things that couldn't die. Then a small hand tugged his sleeve. "Mister, can you fix my toy?" The girl couldn't have been more than 7, her dark hair tangled, coat 2 sizes too large and clearly a hammer down. In her trembling hands, she held the shattered remains of a music box, its ballerina snapped clean off, its delicate mechanism exposed like a wounded heart. The wood was scratched and worn, clearly treasured and held too many times. "It was our last gift from Dad." Marcus froze. The tablet slipped from his fingers. The cafe noise faded into a distant hum, as if someone had turned down the volume on the entire world. He saw his own daughter's face from 3 decades ago, holding her broken dollhouse the morning after the accident that took her mother. Little Sophie, just 8 years old, her eyes red from crying, asking him to fix the tiny furniture she and her mother had painted together. He'd been too buried in grief to fix it then. Too buried in building walls. Too busy running from everything that reminded him of what he'd lost. He'd sold that dollhouse in an estate sale 5 years later, never repaired. The memory struck him now like a physical blow. "Please," the girl whispered, and Marcus realized she was shaking. Tears pulled in her brown eyes, threatening to spill over. "Mom says we can't afford to repair it. But it plays Dad's song. He recorded it special before he..." Her voice cracked, and she couldn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Behind her, a young woman rushed over, face flushed with embarrassment and something else. Exhaustion, maybe, or the kind of bone-deep weariness that comes from carrying too much alone. "Emma, I told you not to bother people." "I'm so sorry, sir." She reached for the child with hands that bore the marks of hard work, calluses, chapped skin, nails cut short and practical. Not the manicured hands of his business associates. Real hands. Hands that labored and loved and held on. But Marcus raised his hand, surprising himself. "Wait." His voice cracked on the single word, unused to speaking anything that mattered. He took the music box with hands that suddenly remembered how to feel something other than the cold glass of a tablet screen. The weight of it shocked him. It was heavier than it looked, substantial, real. Inside the broken casing, he glimpsed an engraved inscription on a small brass plate. Asterisk for my girls. Love doesn't end. Dad asterisk. The mechanism was old-fashioned, delicate, probably custom-made. The kind of craftsmanship you didn't see anymore. The kind someone chose when they wanted to leave something behind that would last. Something that would speak when their voice went silent. Irreplaceable. And yet, as Marcus turned it carefully in his hands, his mind already cataloguing the damage, completely repairable. Something stirred in his chest, a feeling so foreign it took him a moment to identify it. Purpose. For 17 years, he'd signed contracts, closed deals, built wealth. But he hadn't built anything real. Hadn't created anything that mattered. Hadn't touched anything with his own hands that would make a child's eyes light up. His own father had been a watchmaker, a man who understood the poetry of tiny gears and springs, who could hold broken time in his hands and make it whole again. Marcus had learned at his elbow every Sunday afternoon, the smell of oil and metal, the satisfaction of hearing a stopped watch tick back to life. But that was another lifetime. Before business school. Before the empire. Before he'd learned that delegation was efficiency and efficiency was everything. "I can fix this," Marcus said, meeting the girl's hopeful eyes. They reminded him so much of Sophie's, that desperate hope that adults could make broken things whole again, that the world's damages weren't permanent. He'd failed his daughter's hope once. He couldn't fail this child's. But I'll need your help. Emma's face transformed. The tears stopped, replaced by something radiant. Really? You can make it play again? I believe so. Marcus gestured to the empty chair beside him, and the girl scrambled up without hesitation, that beautiful fearless trust that children have before life teaches them to be cautious. Her mother hesitated, clearly torn between gratitude and the wariness of accepting help from strangers, especially wealthy strangers who lived in different worlds. Please, Marcus said to her, and something in his voice must have convinced her, because she nodded and sat down across from them, watching with protective eyes. Marcus opened his briefcase, the $1,000 leather one that usually carried only contracts and his tablet, and pulled out a small toolkit he'd carried for years but never used. His father's tools, kept close like a talisman of a life he'd abandoned. He'd told himself he kept them for sentimental reasons. Now he wondered if some part of him had been waiting for exactly this moment. See this spring? Marcus said to Emma, pointing with a tiny screwdriver. His hands weren't entirely steady, but they remembered. Your dad chose the finest mechanism available. This isn't a cheap music box. He wanted this to last forever. He looked up at the girl, then at her mother. Just like his love for you. Emma leaned in close, her breath fogging the metal slightly. Can you really fix it? Let's find out together, Marcus said, and began to work. Sarah Mitchell watched the impossible scene unfold before her eyes, and for a moment, she wondered if exhaustion had finally pushed her into hallucination. She'd recognized Marcus Chen immediately. His face was plastered across business magazines in every grocery store checkout line. Always stern, always distant, always untouchable. Forbes had called him the Ice King of Silicon Valley just last month. Billionaires didn't talk to single mothers in threadbare coats. They especially didn't invite 7-year-olds to their table or pull out toolkits like they were about to perform surgery. Yet there he sat, Emma perched beside him on the cafe chair, both bent over the broken music box like surgeons over a patient, like priests over something sacred. The morning light caught the silver in his hair, softened the hard lines of his face. He'd loosened his tie, probably a $1,000 strip of silk, and rolled up his shirt sleeves, revealing forearms marked with tiny scars. Working scars. Sarah filed that detail away, curious. See this cylinder here? Marcus was saying, his voice transformed from the clipped tone he'd used when she'd first approached. Now it was warm, almost wondering. Your father installed a custom recording mechanism. Most music boxes just have metal combs that pluck pins, but this one has a miniature recording embedded in the mechanics. That's why you can hear his voice. Emma's eyes went wide. Dad built that. He commissioned it. Had someone build it specifically for you? Marcus adjusted his reading glasses. Sarah hadn't noticed him putting them on, and peered closer at the mechanism. This is museum-quality craftsmanship. Your father loved you very much. Sarah felt her throat tighten. James had worked 3 jobs that last year, saving for Christmas, never mentioning he was sick. The music box had arrived 2 weeks after his funeral, ordered months in advance, a gift from beyond the grave. Emma had played it every night until 3 days ago, when the spring finally gave way. Marcus produced tools from his kit, each one gleaming and clearly expensive, yet worn with use. This tool here is called a gear puller. Can you hold the box steady while I work? He handed Emma a soft cloth. Just like that. Perfect. You've got steady hands. That's important. The cafe around them had gone quiet. Giuseppe, the owner, had stopped grinding coffee beans. Other patrons had lowered their newspapers, their phones, drawn by something they couldn't quite name. A billionaire repairing a dead man's final gift. A child learning to fix what was broken. A moment of grace in an ordinary Tuesday morning. I used to do this with my father, Marcus said softly, working a tiny gear free. Every Sunday afternoon. He was a watchmaker. Had a shop on Clement Street, no bigger than a closet. But he could fix anything that ticked or chimed or played. His hands stilled for a moment. I haven't done this kind of work in decades. Why not? Emma asked with that directness children possess, unaware that some questions cut deep. Marcus was quiet for a long time, his fingers moving through the delicate work. I forgot what mattered, he finally said. I got very busy making money, and I forgot about making things that matter. Does that make sense? Emma nodded seriously. Mom says we don't have much money, but we have things that matter. Like Dad's box. Sarah watched Marcus's jaw tighten, emotion flickering across his face. When he looked up at Emma, his eyes were bright. Your mother is a wise woman. An hour passed like minutes. Giuseppe brought espresso and hot chocolate without being asked, setting them down gently, refusing payment with a shake of his head when Marcus reached for his wallet. Some things shouldn't cost money, the old Italian said. Other patrons whispered and watched, phones raised to capture the scene, but Marcus seemed to have forgotten the world existed beyond that table. His entire being had focused down to tiny springs and gears, to teaching Emma the difference between a flathead and Phillips screwdriver, to explaining how tension and release created music. Sarah found herself leaning forward, drawn in despite herself. She watched his hands, surprisingly capable, moving with practiced precision, and wondered about the scars, the worn tools, the reading glasses he clearly needed but probably rarely wore. This wasn't the man from the magazine covers. Or maybe it was, but a version that had been buried under years of board meetings and profit margins. The tricky part, Marcus murmured, more to himself than to Emma, is realigning the cylinder without damaging the recording. If we rush this, we lose your father's voice forever. He glanced at Emma. So we don't rush. We take our time. Some things are worth getting right. Emma bit her lip, watching every movement. Is it going to work? I think so. But here's what I know for certain. Whether it works today or takes us 3 more Tuesdays, we'll get it right. I promise. Marcus looked up at Sarah then, meeting her eyes. If that's okay with your mother. 3 more Tuesdays. Sarah heard the unspoken question, the unexpected vulnerability in this powerful man's voice. He wasn't just fixing a music box. He was fixing something in himself, and somehow her daughter had become part of that healing. That's okay with me, Sarah said softly. Marcus smiled, actually smiled, transforming his face into something almost boyish, and returned to his work. Finally, after several more careful adjustments, a soft click echoed through the quiet cafe. He held his breath, wound the key with infinite gentleness, and then music filled Giuseppe's cafe. A simple melody rose from the box, tinkling and sweet, but beneath it, threading through it, a man's voice hummed along. James's voice, warm and alive and eternally present, singing the lullaby he'd made up when Emma was a baby. Close your eyes, little star, let me show you who you are. Emma gasped, clutching the music box to her chest as tears streamed down her face. Sarah couldn't help her own. Even Giuseppe wiped his eyes with his apron. The other patrons had gone completely silent, some crying openly, strangers bound together by the simple power of a father's love reaching across death. Marcus sat back slowly, looking at his hands as if seeing them for the first time in years. His shoulders shook once, then stilled. Your father was a smart man, he said quietly, his voice rough. This mechanism, he had it custom built to last a lifetime. Maybe 2. How did you know how to fix it? Emma asked, still holding the box like it might disappear. I used to fix things, Marcus said, voice distant, traveling back through decades. Before I forgot how. Before I forgot why. He looked at the music box, at Emma, at his own hands still holding the tiny screwdriver. Your father reminded me. Sarah approached cautiously, placing a hand on Emma's shoulder. Mr. Chen, I don't know how to thank you. We can't possibly pay. Pay? Marcus looked genuinely confused, then almost offended. No. This. He gestured helplessly at the music box, at Emma's joy radiating like sunlight, at something larger he couldn't quite name but could finally feel. This is the first real thing I've done in 17 years. I should be thanking you. He stood abruptly, gathering his things with hands that trembled slightly. The businessman was returning, the armor sliding back into place, and Sarah felt a pang of disappointment. Of course this moment couldn't last. Men like Marcus Chen didn't really exist in worlds like hers. It had been beautiful, but it was over. But then Emma grabbed his hand with both of hers. Will you come fix things with me again? Her voice was small but fierce. Mom says I have Dad's hands. He was good at building stuff. Maybe you could teach me more things. Maybe. She looked at her mother, then back at Marcus. Maybe you could tell me about your dad too. The watchmaker. Marcus Chen, who'd fired 1,000 employees without flinching, who'd negotiated mergers worth billions without blinking, who'd been called heartless by 3 separate ex-wives, found himself utterly undone by a child's invitation. His throat worked. His eyes went bright. He looked at Sarah, a question in his gaze, asking permission, asking forgiveness, asking for something he'd thought was lost forever. The chance to matter again. Sarah saw her own grief reflected in his face, her own loneliness, her own desperate need to believe that broken things could be made whole. She nodded permission through her tears. Every Tuesday, Marcus heard himself say, the words coming from somewhere deep and long forgotten. 7:15. Giuseppe's Cafe. I'll bring the tools. You bring something that needs fixing. Emma beamed. It's a deal. Marcus shook her small hand solemnly, sealing the promise. Then he did something that shocked even himself. He bent down and hugged her, briefly, awkwardly, but real. When he straightened, his eyes were wet. Thank you, he whispered, for reminding me. As he walked toward the door, briefcase in one hand, the other still tingling from Emma's grip, Giuseppe called out, Mr. Chen, your coffee, you didn't drink it. Marcus paused, turned back, and smiled, really smiled. I'll have it next Tuesday. Put it on my tab. The cafe erupted in spontaneous applause.